Yeah.
What about the Starfire cabinet?
The Starfire cabinet was created by Exidy. Yeah, a fellow named Michael Cooperhart. There's two Michael Cooperharts in the art world. He's the other one. he did a lot of really fancy sculptures. He's fairly well known for a couple of things, but he did all the cabinet art, all the cabinet design for Exidy for quite a number of years.
What's Tailgunner? Is Tailgunner?
Tailgunner was licensed from a company called Cinematronics, one of their best products. And we did the cabinet. I think in that particular cabinet, there was one problem with the cabinet. The controls were mounted straight up and down. But when you sit, you're all reclined, and so it was weird for your wrist. And so the other thing that was really bad is that if you were small enough, you could sit down in the cabinet and kick the sides off it and get the money box. So that wasn't very good for sales. Kids were knocking the sides of the cabinet off and still in the money box.
I was just enjoying Hard Hat. Is there a story behind that one too?
Hard Hat is another one-off game. Yeah, I programmed that in a very short period of time. Again, trying to get rid of some of the inventory of our circus boards. And it was kind of a goofy idea that was moderately fun, and it made okay money in the arcade, but not enough to justify going into production. Yes?
What was with the decision for the joystick on Venture?
Venture. So I wasn't on the Venture project, except I did a bunch of audio for that project.
Okay.
That was mostly Vic Ptolemy, I think, and as far as the cabinet design, that would have been Michael Cooperhart, yeah, and I'm not sure. I personally didn't think there was anything wrong with it. Do you?
The joystick is, it's pretty kludgy.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it's probably the joystick of the time. There was two kinds of joysticks that you could buy, the 4-way and the 8-way. And I think that was a 4-way joystick, if I'm not mistaken. And they were a little kludgy, plastic parts that didn't work too good sometimes. You had to replace them all the time. Even on the very first game we did, the Thumper Bumper, the biggest problem we had was the little pots that control your character, your puck moving up and down. They would foul up and quit working. And it was a very unsophisticated user. If you had mom and pop grocery stores buying these things and it didn't work, what do? Well, sometimes they ship the whole cabinet back to you for repair. And they needed a pot, so it was a learning process at that time. Yes?
Did you make or license any other Vector games besides Tailgunner?
Well, we did Vertigo, right?
That was not licensed. That was produced in-house. I think Tailgunner might have been the only one that we got from at the time Cinematronics. Actually, they went out of business and we bought all their leftover assets after they went out of business. We had a couple of really nice games, and then we had a series of failures after another that put the company out of business.
So was Vertigo black and white or color?
It was color.
And there's also Tomcat or it was on the same hardware, kind of board at the moment. Top Gunner.
Top Gunner. Oh, yeah, that was the second game on the Vertigo cabinet. So, and for those of you that don't know, most people have never seen a Vertigo cabinet. But it is a rock and roll cabinet. It goes up and down, it goes left and right. And so it's like a simulator. And Vertigo was a bunch of rings that you had to fly your ship through, and your cabinet would roll and so forth, and go up and down. It gave you a nice little sensation, but the game was just dead boring. I mean, it was fun for a little while to go up and down, left and right in the cabinet, but then it was just dead boring, and it just didn't really succeed as a fun game.
What kind of sales numbers did you have with your most popular games? Can you give us some ideas?
I think Death Ray sold about 5,000 units before we went out of production. And we were out of production about 9 months before all the bad press occurred. And then we had to go back into production for about 1,500 more units because of the bad press. So we learned firsthand that bad press is good. Bad press is good. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ken, and he's going to show you some of the gun games that he did.
Okay,
Ken?
you got the projector out?
I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce everybody here. This is Nick Gillian, and Nick is the programmer who built the engine for the crossbow gun game. He set up the scripting languages and so forth for all of the level producers. And then Ken is one of the level producers, and I was the chief leader of the level producers at the time.
While he's getting started, was there an intentionality behind the whole C prefix? Was it just
C.
all the games start with C?
I think it was dumb luck after the first two.
Really?
Yeah, and then it just just carried itself, forward. And yeah, nobody set out to do that on purpose. The first one was crossbow, the second one just happened to be Cheyenne, and then for some reason we just kept trying to find a C word for the next game. Yeah.
Did you do anything with the ports to home consoles or program with yourselves?
No, we licensed all of those out. They were all done by outside development teams. Yes.
How about Tar and Crash? You guys have any involvement in those two games?
Yeah, we did those games. Tard was the first of the two, the Tard and then Spectre are very similar.
Yeah, expected.
I remember a guy named Miguel was involved in that. I can't remember exactly who programmed that. Spectre,
Robot Bowl too. Did you have any games in Robot Bowl?
we have what?
Robot Bowl?
What about it?
Bowl game? Are you guys involved with that?
We developed that, yeah. That was a really old game. That was a TTL game. There was no processor in that. Yes. Yeah, and actually I have a story to tell you about that. Just before we decided to make Chiller, what I was doing was, now Nick had written a art program. Now at that time you couldn't buy art programs. There weren't any kind of, there was no software out there.
This was on our new platform, the 440 platform, which all the gun games were based on. And so when we started that, we started with a 6809 processor on there, and it enabled us to do a little bit more than 6502 code. We had a lot more memory on board, a lot more ROM available, so we could do higher level types of games. It also had better resolution. And so we were kind of starting from scratch on that one. So we did have to develop a paint program for it, a simple paint program that enabled us to create the backgrounds and the sprites and everything that we saw in the games.
Right, and in the course of improving that paint program, I was adding features like crazy, vectors and circles, we name it, all sorts of things. And in the process of testing the tool that I'm writing, I was making the scene, the Chiller scene, the guy on the wall, and I was just trying to be artistic, and also it was just, again, a goof. It was just a goof, and I never really thought it wasn't for any particular purpose. I was just testing my art programs. And the farther it went, the worse, the more gruesome it became. And the tool eventually got mature and finished, and just as I'm wrapping it up, he walks in and said, "That's our next game!" So I couldn't believe it. Really? We're gonna make a torture game? Yes?
How about the nudity games in it too at the end?
You can thank me for that.
Thank you.
It was pretty low resolution, so not much to worry about.
So I thought we could watch some crossbow, and we've got some stills. We've got some videos from some of the other games. So I joined. My name's Ken Nicholson. I joined Exidy right about the time that this game had like one level completed, and so I wasn't too good at programming or art, but I did help where I could and help with some of the ideas. And we were talking about how restrictive the development was. You couldn't put too much detail in the pictures because it would take up too much space in the ROMs. And then I think who was it that developed Nick? Nick, you developed a texture capability,
Yeah,
right?
within the paint program, you could actually take any of the background color and do a texture overlay.
So this game was, or this series of games, they had a light pen pointed at the display. That's how it worked. It was a light
Yeah.
pen with optics
Well,
built
it's
into
an
the
optical,
gun.
yeah, and you had to basically flash the screen so you could get a good registration of where the gun was pointed.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that. I did the code for that. It's kind of tricky. Does anybody here know how a light gun works? So what happens is you have a lens that's focusing hopefully on a single pixel out there somewhere. And then as you flash the screen, eventually that photon hits your sensor. And at that point, you latch a counter. From the time you get, well, actually from the time that the line begins to draw, you start a counter. And when you get the impulse, you lock the latch. So the reason for that is when you get an interrupt, you don't know how many cycles have passed from the time you got the interrupt started to the time you serviced it. So to keep it from wobbling around, you have to know how many cycles have gone by. So actually the latch occurred when you got your input, and the reading of the latch and the interrupt function would tell you how much time elapsed. And that way you can pinpoint what line, what X, which horizontal position of the line it was. We would love to have not had to flash the screen, but certain colors don't register as fast as other colors, and so it's not accurate when you try to just look at the screen and take a picture. So we decided for accuracy, we would flash the screen in one frame.
One of the things I like to talk about is I studied video games in college. I wasn't actually studying it as coursework. Instead of going to classes, I would go to the arcade on campus and play video games. And when I got, when they decided that I'd done that for too long, I got a job. And so one of the things that I did apart from coursework was play Dungeons and Dragons, and my head was full of all of these ideas of like magicians throwing fireballs and dragons. And so when I joined the team, I was really excited about, let's do dragons with fireballs, or let's do wizards. And they said, well, no, the hardware really can't do that. We could maybe have a magician this big, and he can't be on the screen at the same time when there's a fireball. And so there were a lot of things that we tried to do that were kind of pushing the edge of the hardware capability. Larry, you said this was the 440 system, and the reason you figured out was
440 wide.
440 pixels
330
wide.
high, I think.
And I remember it being 16 colors, but the sprites seem to have their own color palette as well. The sprites are the individual moving objects.
There's a color cable.
Yeah, I believe that's true. You could actually only have 16 colors, but they could be any one of many, many colors based on a lookup table. So we did a lot of tricks in the game where we used that lookup table to actually create animation of like water flowing or volcanoes coming down, that kind of
So
stuff.
you can see some of that here. This is, there's a witch. There's a witch that pops up, and she says a sped up version of the word curse you, the words curse you. But Larry always joked that it sounded like she was saying Fotler. And then we got a letter from somebody that said, my wife and I are debating, what is he saying? The ghost effect in here, we couldn't do transparency, so if you'll see, it's this stupid blinking effect. Sometimes it was white, sometimes it's clear. And everybody was just contributing ideas, and the ones that people didn't hate got to be part of it.
When we started to create this game, he came to us and said, we want a gun game, and that was his only criteria. We're all going, we don't want to create a gun game, we don't like gun games, just shooting at targets and stuff. So came up with an idea of making kind of more of an adventure game where you're protecting your friends, and your friends have dangers that they're facing, and you have to protect them from those dangers. So it became a little bit more of an adventure game than just a straight shoot 'em up kind of game.
This game, we took it to the AMOA convention. It was pretty popular, and we came back and we were excited to ship it. But Pete, the owner, wanted us to go back into design, and we kind of fought it. He wanted to change the music in a couple of places, but it was so well received that they actually made. I think I have the only one of these T-shirts that still exists. I thought I'd bring it and show it to you. This is the Exidy T-shirt that they gave to the team members. And it's got #1 on the back. I don't think Exidy made any other game T-shirts, but this has been just sitting in a dark corner of my closet for a while. Anyway, let's look at some other items here. Well, the laugh and the ha ha ha, that's my voice. I did all the voice recording stuff for this, except some of the screams. Yeah, that flashing really is annoying. Okay, you see we've got this, this cool lava animation there. We can stop it on a non-flashing screen. I think visually this one's really nice because you get the gradations of gray in the sky. You get the gray plus the dithering effect that we have on the ground. It looked, because we were able to get around that compression problem with detail, we were able to add more interesting graphics to the screen. And you know what Larry was talking about before about it's important to give it adrenaline. It seemed to me as I was learning video games from these guys when I was working there that you had to have something cool that people wanted to see, but you had to hold it off. It was going to cost you 10 quarters before you'd see the big monster at the end. There actually, Larry, do you remember we put Godzilla in one of the games, games. We called him Gadzuki because we didn't want him to get Gadzuka, I think. We didn't want to get sued for using that. Another level. Same sort of flowing water effect in here. So one of the things that tells you early in this game is don't shoot your friends, which is good advice. But it was a response to a game problem. It's like, how do people know not to shoot the thing walking across the screen? It was a new game.
Yeah, actually, at the very first iteration of it was that when you shot your friends, they died. But that was your character, and your game was over pretty quick when that happened. We thought it was pretty harsh, so we replaced it with "Don't shoot your friends."
Yeah, and the idea that you're this protector just kind of, we kind of took it further when we did the next game, Cheyenne. Let's see if we can look at just a couple more. Oh, there's a funny thing about the monkeys. The monkeys in this jungle scene, and that was the jungle level, right? The monkeys. Oh look, he's throwing the toucan at the players. We got a letter from PETA. Yeah, we got a letter from PETA asking us to explain why we made a game that encouraged shooting monkeys. And Vic Ptolemy, he really should be here today. He had some family things, he couldn't make it, but Vic was the head of our software group and engineering group, and he sent back a letter saying, well, you understand these are bad monkeys, and they're trying to make them real, and they're not real monkeys, and we would never promote them. He tried to take it seriously. There's another one. I don't know if this is talked about, and I apologize in advance for any offense that this might make, but it's part of history, and I want to mention, I don't know if we pioneered this, but we had this idea when you won the game, you could shoot your initials you could select your initials and they would go on the high score table. Everybody did that. But we started incorporating those letters into the visuals of the game. We draw them, and you'll see some examples of that. And I think at one point we got a letter, a complaint, because someone had put in their high score initials of JEW and it appeared on a bank. So it appeared to say Bank of Jew, which they thought was us intentionally making an anti-Semitic comment. Of course, we had a lot of explaining to do how we had no control over what letters could be put in that. You know, I think after that, didn't we do a test for the letters and try to make sure there weren't some bad words showing up on the
Kept the
screen?
bad words out. That
Yeah.
was all we really did. We never thought of JW as a bad word. We thought it would be an encouragement to the players to get on the top of the high score table, so because their initials would appear in the game. And it kind of backfired.
So apologies to this is apologize for the flashing, but it's just the technology. This is kind of cool because these guys would shoot arrows in random order, and I found this was the toughest level to get through. Then you get into the inner sanctum, where the ultimate bad guy was there. It was kind of hard to do because we didn't tell you what the map was, so sometimes you would shoot the wrong color, and it would take you to a level you'd already played. But we had spears coming out, the dragon coming in from the ceiling, shooting fireballs. And if you could make it, if your friends could make it all the way here to this one, then they would fall down through the floor, through a trapdoor. Unfortunately, we couldn't figure out a technical way to keep it from being seen behind the scores.
Has anyone here made it through all the way?
So this is, we called him Evil Exidy, I think, didn't we? We called this guy, or Coindor. I think Coindor was a fun Coindor the magician. And I maintain that this is a representation of the owner of the company. We had Pete's caricature on. Anyway, so that's this game. So we put on the default high score table the initials. So that's Nick Gillian. Nick, he was credited as the #1 spot. These are built into the game. So if you reset the ROMs and there's no high score player information, these are the initials that appear on the high score table. This is LWH. That would be Larry. Larry. What's the W stand for?
Wayne.
Wayne. Okay. Didn't know that. The next one is Howell Ivy. And has his name come up? Howell?
Yeah, Hal was the VP of the company for many years. He was the designer of he was the leader in the design of the 440. He also designed the vertical cabinet, the 68,000 game system, as well as numerous other things such as the Sorcerer, the Exidy Sorcerer. I don't know if anybody know about the computer that Exidy made.
There's a great history of Exidy, lots of detail about all these people. It's called The Ultimate History of Exidy So Far. And just Google those words and you'll find it. Howell was a real Southern gentleman. I don't know if he's still working in the industry, but there were two things he always used to, or two quotes. He would say, you'd ask him, can we do this? Can we add this? And he would say, anything's possible. And then the other thing he would say is, it's all an illusion. Those are like his answers there. Vic Ptolemy, we talked about. Mark von Stryver?
Mark von Stryver.
Yeah, he was key on the hardware team. Mike Craven also helped. Joe, I want to say Joe Stever, but that's probably.
I can't remember his name.
Okay. Ray was one of the artists. He did a lot of the art cabinetry, and I think this is Lee. He was one of the artists that was on the team. That's me at the bottom of the list. So, then there's what the cabinet looks like. I didn't see a crossbow out on the floor. I did see a Cheyenne, which is of course the same cabinet.
The Cheyenne cabinet out there is actually playing crossbow.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. The conversion. You know, these stocks were always breaking, and I'm sure Exidy did a healthy business in replacement parts. It must be a devil for you guys trying to restore these things.
I have some insight in that. So the gun that was used came off of a very old game that was all mechanical, and it had a big piece of board underneath with a little pointer that would go around. If you were on the right trace, when you pulled the trigger, you got a score. Well, we got that mechanism, and we had it sent to the foundry and cast in aluminum. And then we put a wooden stock on it, which would get broken, so we eventually made aluminum stocks. So eventually it became a full, yes.
Yeah, I was curious, just looking at it again, I'd forgotten that it was originally mounted like that. Did you consider using a pot mount gun instead of the light pen, sort of?
A what?
A pot mount gun, essentially a gun mounted on a joystick for.
No, we just used a
Analog
mechanism that we
joystick.
got from a game that was maybe 20 years older at the time. Yeah,
His
we
question
had,
was about the light pen.
oh, the pen itself?
Instead of that, just like using like resistors or.
Oh, no, it was always gonna be optical. Yeah.
I think the optics in that were special order from Germany, and they were highly precise and polished.
The lenses were, but we actually did the engineering in-house. Hal Lively designed that gun.
Was it the first optical game?
It was the first one we did. I don't know if it was the first one.
You can see that on the high score table here, Larry got #1 billing, and Nick got bumped down to #2. So it was real, vying to be. If you were the designer, you got to be #1. So Cheyenne was I think more popular than Crossbow, wasn't it?
I don't think so.
You're about the same. 1984.
One of the bad things about the progression of games and why the older games are harder to find is that we would sell a crossbow and then we would convert it to a Cheyenne. And we would sell a Cheyenne and then we would convert it to a combat. And so all these conversions subtract a lot from the original outlay of crossbows. So I imagine crossbows are pretty hard to find, especially with the original crossbow. Most of them got upgraded to the next game in the series.
Most of these games you can watch a whole playthrough of the game on YouTube. For Chiller, there is an article that somebody has written about talking about how terrible the game is and how awful that it should have been produced and how gruesome it is.
And we
There's
agree.
a lot of blood and gore. We were tickled in this one. We thought it was really funny that we didn't have to do all the work to do a dead bull. There's a bull that comes charging in here, and then he gets about partway if you shoot him. We didn't want to have a dead bull sitting there using up resources, and it would look kind of gross. So it just turns into a hamburger. He thought that was the sound for the I did the sound on this game, and the sound for the piano player, I'd taken digital samples. Yeah, didn't care who I recorded from. There was no law about sampling other people's songs or music. And then I just cut it into short sections and loop it because we didn't have the ability to play through MIDI or a synthesizer any sort of melodic music. So it was all based on sound effects or music sampled as a sound effect. This is one I remember Larry working on this for a long time. It's got the ore cars coming in from the right and left. I could never beat this level. It was pretty tough. And we had fun naming all of the gals. The idea that you had to earn money by capturing or killing all the members of these outlaw bands. And so we just came up with ridiculous puns and a lot of love. Oh yeah, she was a good floozy. All right, so this was an interesting idea in this one where the stagecoach stays still, and you get the impression of it moving because we're moving all of the objects across the screen. I didn't really remember this level until I was looking up, but it's got a skeleton. When you shoot the skeleton, it disintegrates, and all the bones disintegrate. And so I actually went to a bowling alley and recorded, someone bowling a strike a couple of times, and used that as the sound effect. Here's an example of the high score table being placed on headstones in the game. Then we did combat. I don't know how has anybody ever played a version of combat or seen the ROMs or anything? is there a MAME version? You know? Okay. This one I thought was real fun. Nick swears he didn't work on it. His name isn't on the table. I think he probably left after.
Yeah,
But
I was already gone by the time this, and as well as the other game after that.
Oh, okay. Well, before we move on to combat, any comments about Cheyenne or Crossbow that you want to make?
No, unless if people have questions on it.
I do have one question. The cow, the bull being turned into a hamburger, did Peter bother you about that?
No, we didn't get any vegans calling us about that or anything. Any other
Actually,
questions about
we were afraid to come to work a few times with death threats because we actually got some death threats and some bomb threats.
Okay, this Catch-22, you shoot on a country and then you have to go clear that level. Had some neat stuff. I remember this was, I think, the first level I did myself. I was really proud of it. And then Larry had to fix it, make it fun and playable. But the idea is that you had fighter bombers coming in trying to destroy the ships, and it was kind of like a Galaxian wannabe level. This is kind of like a bomb run game. Then we did Chiller, the one I talked about before. Chiller was done at the time when the Michael Jackson video Thriller came out, and you know, we were very proud. We would try to steal ideas wherever we could find them. So we thought, well, we need to do something, you know, like Thriller. What if we call it Chiller? Oh no, we'll get sued. It'll be an obvious ripoff. And so I was then now trying my hand at doing some of the artwork. Back then, artwork, you didn't really have mice. All you had was a joystick and a button to draw pixels on the screen. You couldn't scan art or anything. So it was a very labor-intensive process, and I had no art training. So I would go to comic book stores and buy a comic book with scary artwork, and then take that back and try and reproduce what I thought were some neat things. So this like haunted house that you see up here, which is really, you know, somebody took a long time doing it. I just copied the way they used the light. So here you see this series of 440 games: Crossbow, Cheyenne, Combat, Crack Shot, Chiller. There were some others in the series. Clay Pigeon, which Pete, the owner of the company, said, I really like shooting, going
Skeet hunting, or
skeet hunting, skeet shooting. And so he thought that all the bars in the world needed a trap shooting game. So
Skeet and trap, yeah.
at this point, we had been working with this gun system for so long and the tools that we were able to produce a new game in record time. And that Clay Pigeon game, I think we got out in less than 3 months.
Bombed about as quickly.
There's another one called Spin a Ball. Oh, terrible game. It was tic-tac-toe with a trackball. I hope no one can ever resurrect that.
Oh,
game.
no, it's
It's
more than
terrible.
that. There were some other fun things in there, but it's still bombed. It seemed the later the 440 game system went, the worse the games got.
This one was fun because you got to shoot the heads, and this is where the nudity appeared, right? You shoot that, you could shoot her shirt off.
Wow.
And very shocking. You know, we would try things and see if we could get away with it. I was having fun. I wanted to do a 3D effect of this head coming out of the distance, and it would come and grow toward you until it got right in front of your face, and then the eye would melt off to the side. I thought that was really cool. After we had to compress the graphics down, it didn't look as good, but then Larry added the Scooby-Doo effect to it. He brought a dog in, and dog would pick up this severed limb and chew on it and walk off screen. You could shoot this panel open and see what's inside. I encourage you to watch the YouTube video of Chiller because it's ridiculous. There's a good reason it was banned in the UK. I saw Larry doing this level and I just couldn't believe it. Like, no, you can't do that. And the idea is, you know, you're trying to torture these people, so you shoot at at the handles here in order to compress the head. You shoot the legs off first so that you can see the bone, and then you shoot, the whole thing. It's really gory. Larry, were you going through some difficult times?
Yes.
How come they changed combat from Catch 22 to combat?
There's two games there, Combat and Catch 22.
It's the same game.
Oh, wait a minute.
I think combat was first, and then Vic did a
Honestly,
variation.
I don't recall why we did that.
And then
I'm
the same
sorry.
thing with the card game, Showdown, you called it Yukon.
Oh, I did Showdown. Yeah, this is after pretty much everybody had gone. I was the last engineer left. I did Showdown, and it was actually pretty successful.
It's supposed to be
Yukon,
right?
Yukon is a very special version of Showdown that was used in a gambling casino in Malta. And it has a lot of extra features in it to guarantee the house wins at a certain percentage. And the player still has a chance to win money,
So
of course.
it's different than Showdown.
Yeah, Showdown cheats in favor of making it more fun to play.
Right.
Yukon cheats in favor of the house having a slight odd to win.
So how come Yukon never came out, it's just a prototype, right?
Yukon was sold in Malta as a gambling device.
I have the marquee, I just can't find the board.
Yeah, it's almost the same game, it just has different background on it, or different logic under it. Yeah. So I actually liked Showdown quite a bit, I had a lot of fun
Yeah,
doing
it's
it.
a good game.
Yeah, there's some interesting ways that I was able to make that fun to play by giving the computer second draw behind the scenes so they could tell.
Yeah, when you won the card game, you go into a draw with three guys, like a standoff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Know when to fold them,
Yeah.
know when to run away, yeah.
Larry, earlier we were talking, you mentioned that there's an Easter egg, or there's a cheat in
Chiller.
In
Yeah.
Chiller.
Yeah, I wish I could remember which bricks, but if you shoot the bricks in the right order, you'll get 99 credits. Oh. And I used that in the arcade a few times before I forgot the code. I forgot what bricks was where. I doubt seriously anybody ever found it by random.
You ever win the
Millions of
bonus
bucks.
level, or does that just keep going and going and going and going? The bonus level, like when you beat you get all the secret things in every level, then you get this bonus where you see the faces go across, and you shoot them, it just goes over and over. Does it ever end, or is it?
I can't remember
It stops
if
eventually.
you lose
It
too
just
many,
stops.
you'll end or something like that, I can't remember.
Yeah, it ends if you miss like one, but I mean, if you just keep hitting it. It just
I think it just keeps getting faster and eventually you're not going to be able to keep it. I did most of the tuning of all the games, all of them games, so I like to make it hard, of course, but fun. And it was a challenge to, and I had to play every level, sometimes many dozens of times to get it tuned properly.
Yeah, it's a special art. I never figured out what the magic was, but you take it a level and work on it, and then it would be fun and playable and work. What has anybody seen the game Crack Shot in the wild? You've seen Crack Shot?
Oh, yeah.
It still exists.
Yeah, Hit and Miss too was the other one. That was
Hit
like
and
that
Miss.
that same kind of like where you'd have like multiple selections that you would do. Was Crack Shot the one with the balloons that went across, or was that
Yeah,
Hit and Miss
that's
that
Hit
had
and Miss.
balloons?
That's hit and miss.
Yeah, one of them had balloons and the other one you had. So that's the selected scene. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, a Crack Shot. This is just kind of like almost like a police marksmanship training level where you have to, don't shoot the good guys, only shoot the bad guys. Crack Shot. We had this idea that you can barely see this in this image. It says Pete's Bar and Grill, and the idea is don't shoot the mirror. The mirror is like your friend here. Did you say 5? Sorry. Okay, I was just kidding. All right, and so we had to do some interesting things to figure out where the bottle was, and then change. We had so many things that you could shoot at. It's basically a shooting gallery game, but don't shoot you could shoot the bottles as they're sliding by. It'd be great to see a YouTube video. I haven't seen that. This was a level I worked on. This was a lot of fun. This was again like a Galaxian. These little buzzing alien spaceships would we're trying to crash into your moon base. And I don't know where this artwork came from, but somebody did a barber pole that spins out of the ground with an eye on top of it, and you shoot it and it dies saying "I." Really crazy, wacky stuff. I don't know if it made any sense. Oh, I also had fun. I sampled the Jetsons car sound, and when that little guy goes across the screen, he makes the Jetson car sound. I think there's a huge bonus if you happen to shoot it.
There's also Who Done It?
Who Done It?
Yeah, that was kind of at the end of the 440 system. Kind of a mystery novel type of game. Is it? Did anybody see that out there? Okay.
Top Secret was kind of born out of, I think right after we did Crossbow, I went to, with the team, we went to the New Orleans game convention. And I saw Spy Hunter. Yeah, such a cool game, and I played it a lot there, and I wish we had something. Of course, with the 440 system, we couldn't do scrolling. We couldn't scroll the background or anything. And I begged Howell Ivy, is there any way we can do it? And he said, well, I could make it so that I changed the pointer of the screen so that basically the screen gets up, moved up, and then you get to draw in like an extra line of video on the bottom.
And it gave me a lot of fits. But I really like the playability of that game. And,
So,
but it's difficult to play. It's really hard.
There's one on the floor, but it was
5
turned
buttons
off.
that you have to master the weapons with, the button for shield, there's a gas pedal, and there's a steering wheel. I mean, it's a dexterity test in itself. But once you learn how to play it, it's just so fun.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was such a high learning curve that it didn't do well in the arcade.
Has anybody seen one of these with the LED panel on the front? When you step on the throttle, an RPM gauge made of LEDs, green, yellow, and red, I think, appear on the bottom, and it was kind of a custom thing built into the sit-down cabinets. I wonder if any of those exist anymore. They're really, I guess, rare at this point. But you know, visually, the game, there's not a lot to look at. I think you can see a playthrough on YouTube.
Shouldn't this be called Top Secret?
Top Secret. What was interesting is we kind of built the mechanics of the game so that, you know, that we built these puzzles or things that you had to get past. There were cars that would chase you. There were oil slicks that you could drive into and spin out. I remember when Larry put in that spin out on the oil slick. That was a really cool game mechanic. I like that a lot. But you know, if you couldn't avoid them, then you had to find some other way of like destroying an obstacle. And I remember seeing somebody playing it in the arcade. I thought, oh, they're coming up on that laser beam gate. Let's see how they get through it. And I'd always use the heat-seeking missile to kill it, but they used the Top Secret shield or something like that. I was like, what? You can do that? So people were surprising us. And there was a button, a light-up button on the console for each of the power-ups that you could acquire and then use in the game. Top Secret is out there on the floor, but it's dead, I think. Yeah, it's not turned on. Would really like to see that running. Any other questions about Exidy or the Exidy world? Yeah.
How did it really go that makes it so hard to find those star files?
The cabinet or the ghost? Or the yoke on Starfire.
I don't know. Actually, it's a really great game though. If you find it, it's just, it was way ahead of its time.
Over here.
How many Top Secrets were produced?
Oh gosh,
I don't
It was a
know.
small run, and there was a dedicated sit-down version of it. So that went to big arcades. And then there was also a conversion kit, including a control panel, that went out. So I'm not really sure how many, but I'd say in the hundreds maybe.
I don't know how we got this far, but I'll just have to ask it. What about Victor Banana?
Well, I think Victor Banana was a variation of Venture or
Victory.
Victory. So Victory, I think, wasn't a huge commercial seller. And so often what would happen is, maybe if we change the game a little bit, add some different graphics, give it a different feel, we can reintroduce it as a new title and sell it as a new game. And that's, I think, what happened with Catch 22.
It's basically another goof.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any input on like the promotional items, like the Cheyenne hat, it's like a cowboy hat or things like that?
No, I haven't ever seen a Cheyenne hat. That's pretty cool. I remember
This big straw hat, it had a Cheyenne patch in the front. I wasn't sure. Caitlin had one, yeah. I want one too.
for a while, I tried to find it. I couldn't find it before. I wanted to bring it. It was I have an Exidy belt buckle, cast belt buckle that I thought you'd like to see. I remember in terms of promotion that after Crossbow and Cheyenne were out, I just begged the advertising guys to make a print ad that showed both games and had the big letters "Shooting Stars" on it. Nice pun. And I think they actually used that. That was kind of fun. Yeah.
I believe it's on a flyer or some paperwork I've seen that there's a reference to like Hotter Pepper 2 ROMs or something like that. Do you guys know anything?
Hotter Pepper 2
what they
ROMs.
are?
No, I'm not aware of anything like that. I would have had to have made it,
Because it's somewhere, I mean, it could be a hack or something, I don't know.
or it might be a hack to a home conversion or something.
Some-
It was never in the arcade, and I don't know, it was never.
I saw somebody had taken all of the 440 gun games and put them into like one multiplayer game, and even had done some new artwork that looked like it. What's that?
Yeah, multi 440.
Multi 440.
Just take any 440 board and put that kit in, it'll play most of the 440 games.
I hear someone say that was licensed.
Yeah, they licensed that.
Oh wow. Okay.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
So I actually have a little Easter egg for you guys today. 3 games that were made and no one has ever seen. One was called Space Game. It was done on a TI 9918 hardware. There was one made and it was never field tested. Another was a 3D hardware, literally a 3D dual screen hardware with 2 big lenses that you look down to get the 3D effect. And it was so impossibly difficult to line the 2 monitors up with each other that they decided it couldn't be produced. And another bomb that was very expensive was a optical driving game. It was literally a projector on a mirror, and the mirror would rotate around and drive the car around the track. You were controlling physically the mirror. And it was done by a group of aerospace engineers, and it was the tolerances and the cost involved was astronomical. And if you bumped the cabinet, the car would shake for about 10 minutes. Those are 3 things you're never going to see that were developed and never produced.
Yeah, Al Lively actually produced a very unusual piece of hardware that, he does this stuff anyway, but this was a circle vector drawing system. It could only draw circles. And so I designed a game for it, but basically that's all it could do was draw circles, so it didn't really go very far. But it was pretty ingenious that he was able to actually develop a system like that.
The system was called OOPS. OOPS.
Do either of you guys remember, I think earlier before my days at Exidy, there was a connection with RJ Michael and another guy who had gone on to develop the Amiga. Remember that Exidy connection? No? I think a couple of the guys had worked on one of those early game systems and then gone on to work.
One of the last projects that I worked on was the MaxiFlex system, which was a interface to the arcade for the Atari 600. And there was 4 or 5 licensed games, not one of them good, that was put in the cabinet and sent out and kind of died a miserable death. But MaxiFlex cabinets are out there, and you can still find any old Atari 600 game, plug it in and play it like an arcade game, except orders.
Yeah.
What was your #1 game and how many of those were produced?
Got either Bench sure, crossbow, right?
We sold a lot of Circus. Yeah, Circus was huge.
About the time we were doing the crossbow games, there were a lot of competition from Japanese arcade game makers. U.S. arcade game makers were suffering a lot. So I think, probably back in Exidy's heyday when it was producing games like Circus, it did much larger volume than later on that we did.
There's a few games here we haven't mentioned, Card Polo, Attack, Ripcord, Sidetrack, we may have mentioned Crash.
Teeter Torture?
We mentioned that was a one-off.
Spectar.
That was a follow-up to Tard. It was actually very successful. Tard was very successful. We sold a lot of Tards.
Whirly Bucket was a
Yeah, Whirly
skee
Bucket
ball.
was a skee ball, silly little skee ball game that we sold a lot of.
So you talked briefly about the joysticks before. One of the points about that is the joysticks that really stands out is just the enormous ball, very oversized handle. I wonder if there's any story on that. Was there somebody with giant hands or somebody?
I think at the time there was a limited availability of balls with a knurled nut in them. And we got what we could. Yeah. We had a mechanism problem on some of the cabinets, like in the early days of Destruction Derby, we had an actual steering wheel from like a go-kart. It was a pretty nice steering wheel. Kids liked it so much they break it right off the cabinet. And we had to keep beefing up the metal behind it until it was, I think it was over an inch thick. And a 300-pound man at that point could hang off it, it wouldn't break.
I remember a game idea that we were kicking around. About this time, Star Wars was really popular, and it was going to be called Orbi One. And the idea that, like a theremin, you would interact with this thing by just hovering your hands over it. The gameplay would be by just gesturing over the top of this sensor, and so you were like casting spells into this machine. Everybody thought, interesting idea, but I don't think we can come up with a playable game control that would work that way.
One of the names that was proposed for the Mousetrap game was Cheese's Crisis.
Yeah.
I'm really curious if that, in hindsight or at the time, if you felt like the success of the gun games was any sort of like a double-edged sword, or was it? Did you guys feel like you typecast? It went for so long after that you were getting sick of it, but like, did the company, what part of it had to do with just the company feeding out at that time?
The thing about the gun game is that the arcade at that time, if you didn't have something that you could get only in the arcade, it wouldn't survive. So a gun was not something you could get at home. It was one of those things that most kids want to get their hands on a gun, they want to shoot. And so it was just a staple item in the arcade for a long time. It was really good for us. We sold a lot of units. There was a lot of demand for gun games. And frankly, some of the gun games that were out before we came out were pretty pathetic. Of course, there were some terrific ones that came out afterwards. For a long time, Exidy was the only good source for a gun game.
And then did you feel like, was there a point where you felt we need to evolve past this, but the next thing just wasn't quite there? Or?
Yeah, so what happened at that time was the Japanese kind of came in with really low-cost hardware, and our build cost at one point was higher than their selling price of their system. So we were definitely relegated to a niche market of big arcades and conversions from converting an old hardware, an old game to a new game on the same hardware. And so we saw a diminishing return from then on, because originally we would sell a gun game for $29.95, and you get a $200 break if you bought 13, or you get the baker's dozen. You get 13 for the price of 12, and that's an expensive proposition, right? Our hardware cost alone was pretty high. We should have put money into the full-scale integration to get really small prices on our hardware. But we didn't make that multi-million-dollar investment to get that kind of hardware, and that was kind of the demise of the company, really.
I think also the choice of games was always subject to the approval of Pete Kaufman. I remember if you came up with an idea, and I think at one point we were going to do this cool submarine game or something, and he had been burned, I guess, before, or had some rule of thumb. It's like, underwater games don't make money. You just couldn't do it. So, you know, a lot of times games were, well, we have 100 cabinets of this style. What kind of game can we put them in? Or, you know, we've got a lot of this hardware. What can we make out of that? So it was practical. Yeah.
What was the environment and feeling like at the company toward the end? Like, was it a fast process? Were you slowly bleeding employees, or I don't know?
Well, when I joined, it seemed like there had been a purge. There were lots of desks, lots of empty desks. You could have pretty much a whole room as your office. And 83, I think. You know, it did seem as though there was a bit of a hiring increase for a while. But then around the time that we were doing Chiller, money was tight. As it is, I think, in most areas of the game business, you know, unless you've had a recent hit, you're kind of struggling. And so I remember they stopped paying the exterminators to spray poison around the outside of the office. So the whole building became covered with spider webs. And I thought, this is a curse for doing Chiller. We're all cursed. That was something about the job.
They were digging up all the license around too, which pushed all the rodents and people.
Rodents into the building.
Mice and stuff.
So yeah, it did feel kind of depressing as the company shrunk and had less to do, less money to do things with. But, yeah.
So was a successor to the 440 hardware ever considered or developed, or by then was it like too late and just financially feasible?
A better version of the 440, I think Top Secret has that scrolling modification. I can't think of anything else.
We wanted to do an integration of the system to get the build cost down. But that would be the only thing we wanted to do at the end. We were actually kind of looking forward to bigger, better hardware. We had a 68,000 system, but that was also too expensive. And so we were trying to find ways to produce hardware that was cheaper but still powerful enough to make a game with, which was a big challenge at that time.
So when there was a game that didn't go into production, there was only one copy of it. Was anyone in the company like actively thinking about preserving that, or did they just happen to end up in one of these hands?
Wow, I don't know. It's like just put it onto a floppy and forget about it, or fix and print out the copy of the code.
I'll tell you the story of the Creepy Crawler game. Does anybody know anything at all about it? Has anybody heard of Creepy Crawler? Okay. So, Creepy Crawler was a monumental disaster from the beginning. It was a mechanical game that would break down every day. And it was sent to arcade, picked up, repaired, picked up, repaired over and over and over again. It didn't look like it was going to be feasible to produce it. And one day, I sent a young man down to pick it up with his pickup truck, and he called me really upset. He had taken the on-ramp too quickly. The cabinet flew off the truck, and the whole thing was in a million pieces. And we all cheered. And when I went to Pete, he said, "Thank God." And that was the end of that project.
Such an accident.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes.
To speak directly to your question, though, I can't tell you how much artwork, PC boards, even cabinets that I personally just threw in the garbage can, never even giving a second thought that someday someone might want to collect it. So there's just, thousands of opportunities for us to save stuff. We never even considered it, never thought twice of it. was garbage to us. You know, couldn't
What,
sell
what
it,
about
it was garbage.
selling parts? I mean, did Exidy do a big business in selling replacement parts?
That's one of the things that kept Exidy alive at the end, is the part business. There's a huge markup on parts, and especially the custom parts that you have made, foundry parts especially. Tons of markup. Even little springs that we just buy the spring material, find it ourselves, and sell them for $10. You know, it was a great little business at the end.
In the back here.
I noticed I don't see very many of the Exidy cabarets or minis. Were those kind of an afterthought, or there just weren't many cabarets built over the years?
Cabaret cabinet. Is that a tabletop unit or?
Kind of like the smaller
Bar top.
yeah. Kind of smaller arcades.
We made quite a lot of them. They went into bars, and so they were abused pretty well. So I imagine most of them
Didn't Fax go?
survive. Fax was in one. Showdown was in one. In the early days, there was even a tabletop or a bar top TV pinball. One of my favorite is the tabletop TV pinball. Really beautiful piece. I remember walking into a bar one time and betting a guy on the game, and I was like an expert. And I just, you know, sandbagged him for a while, and then just got 4 or 5 free beers out of the deal. It was pretty awesome.
Over here, yeah.
Describe the end of the life of the company. What happened? The employees, the building. You have a party and just go your separate way.
It kind of dwindled bit by bit as the money started drying up. And toward the end, we relocated to Reading and had a manufacturing facility up there. Very few people chose to relocate with us to Reading. It ran for about another year up there, and then financially it just went bust at that point. So yeah, it was a very short, a very small core group that went up there, and then it died soon afterwards.
And then what happened to the intellectual property? Does somebody still retain that, or?
I think Pete's estate still owns some of that. I think bit by bit he may have sold some of that off. Yeah. Actually, Pete's son is here, Jeff, and if you want me to put you in touch with him, I'll introduce you. He may be able to give you some information on that.
Okay, with that, we're going to wrap it up, and thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. We really appreciate your interest and attention to the Exidy games. Please keep them alive. Thanks very much.